The Galactic Council's emergency session had been called for the third time this cycle, and Ambassador Vextai could feel the tension crackling through the crystalline chambers like static electricity. Representatives from 47 different species sat in their designated atmospheric pods, each one perfectly calibrated to maintain their homeworld conditions. The air shimmered with translation fields and the soft hum of life support systems. "The situation has escalated beyond our initial projections," announced High Chancellor Mordak, her 6 eyes scanning the assembled delegates. The Zenthari leader's voice carried the weight of genuine concern, something that hadn't been heard in these chambers for over 2 centuries. "The hegemony has begun systematic extermination of frontier colonies." A collective shudder ran through the assembly. The hegemony was known throughout the galaxy as a military powerhouse, their ships bristling with weapons that could crack planets, and their soldiers engineered for maximum lethality. They had emerged from the dark sectors of space 5 years ago, demanding tribute and submission from any civilization they encountered. "How many worlds have fallen?" asked Ambassador Krilltep of the Aquarian Federation, her gills fluttering nervously. 17 in the past month alone," Mordak replied grimly. "They show no mercy to civilians, no consideration for surrender. Every world they touch becomes a lifeless rock." Vextai shifted uncomfortably in his biosuit. As a representative of the Cylone Collective, he had witnessed firsthand the hegemony's brutality when they had glassed the agricultural world of Tephari. 2 billion souls have been lost in a matter of hours, reduced to ash and memory. "What of the defense fleets?" inquired General Zarnoth of the warrior caste of Proxima. Even the normally aggressive Proximans seemed subdued by the news. "Destroyed or scattered," came the reply from Admiral Fellow SS of the Combined Fleet Command. "Their technology is unlike anything we've encountered. Energy shields that adapt to our weapons, armor that self-repairs, and firepower that defies our understanding of physics." The chamber fell silent except for the whisper of recycled air and the nervous clicking of various species' anxiety responses. The galaxy had enjoyed relative peace for over 300 years, with conflicts resolved through diplomacy or limited engagements. The hegemony represented something new and terrifying. "There must be something we can do," insisted Senator Yilandra of the Trade Union Worlds. "Some weakness we can exploit, some alliance we can forge." High Chancellor Mordak's expression darkened further. "We have tried everything within our power. Diplomatic envoys have been executed without ceremony. Economic sanctions are meaningless to a force that simply takes what it wants. Our most advanced weapons barely scratch their hulls." "What about the forbidden sectors?" suggested a voice from the back of the chamber. All heads turned to see who had spoken the unthinkable. It was Dr. Lethmore, the chief xenobiologist from the research consortium. The elderly scientist's numerous eyes were dim with age, but his voice carried conviction. "The sectors we agreed never to explore. The regions marked as too dangerous for galactic civilization." A chorus of horrified gasps filled the chamber. The forbidden sectors had been sealed by unanimous galactic agreement over 1,000 years ago. Ancient automated probes had returned with data so disturbing that the records were classified at the highest levels, accessible only to the Council of Elders. "You cannot be serious," sputtered Ambassador Vextai. "Those regions were forbidden for good reason. The probe data spoke of worlds so hostile that life itself was considered impossible." "Deathworlders," whispered someone, and the phrase seemed to echo in the sudden silence. Dr. Lethmore stood slowly, his anti-grav chair humming as it adjusted to his movement. "I have spent my entire career studying the evolution of intelligence across the galaxy. Every sapient species we know evolved on worlds we consider habitable. Moderate temperatures, reasonable gravity, breathable atmospheres, stable star systems." He activated a holographic display that showed the galactic map, with the forbidden sectors highlighted in ominous red. "But what if intelligence could evolve under different conditions? What if there are species out there that consider our habitable worlds to be paradise, while they themselves were forged in the crucible of true hell?" Even if such beings existed, interrupted General Zarnoth, they would be impossibly aggressive. Evolution in such environments would produce nothing but predators and killers. Exactly, Dr. Lethmore said quietly. Predators and killers that make the hegemony look like younglings playing with toys. The implications hung in the air like a toxic cloud. High Chancellor Mordak finally broke the silence. You are suggesting we make contact with potential species that could be even more dangerous than our current enemy. I am suggesting, the old scientist replied, that we find species that would consider the hegemony to be easy prey. The debate that followed was unlike anything in the Council's recorded history. Voices were raised, threats were made, and several delegations stormed out only to return hours later. The ethical implications were staggering, but so was the alternative. The hegemony showed no signs of stopping their advance, and projections indicated that the galactic core worlds would be under attack within 2 years. Finally, after 18 hours of continuous deliberation, a vote was called. The margin was narrow, but the decision was made. A single, heavily shielded probe would be sent to one of the forbidden sectors to search for signs of intelligent life. The probe launched from Research Station Omega-7 3 days later. It was equipped with every sensor array known to galactic science, protected by the most advanced shielding technology available, and programmed with first contact protocols that had been hastily modified for potential contact with what the scientists had begun calling Deathworld species. The journey to the nearest forbidden sector took 6 months. During that time, the hegemony continued their relentless advance. For more worlds fell, and refugee ships began crowding the core systems. The galaxy watched and waited as their last desperate gambit traveled through the void toward the unknown. When the probe finally reached the edge of the forbidden sector, its first transmissions back to the research station were almost incomprehensible. The data streams showed star systems with radiation levels that should have been instantly fatal, planets with surface temperatures that would melt most known metals, and gravitational anomalies that defied explanation. But buried in the chaos of hostile readings was something else. Electromagnetic signatures that suggested artificial construction, energy patterns that indicated advanced technology, and, most remarkably, what appeared to be massive industrial operations taking place on worlds that should have been completely uninhabitable. Dr. Lethmore was awakened in the middle of his sleep cycle when the probe's most significant discovery came through. The transmission was brief, but unmistakable, an artificial signal that was clearly a response to the probe's own broadcast. The message was simple, transmitted in mathematical concepts that any technological civilization would understand. It was a set of coordinates and a simple phrase that the translation computers rendered as, "Come if you dare." The source of the signal was a system deep within the forbidden sector, orbiting a star that emitted radiation levels that would cook most galactic species in seconds. The third planet in that system showed clear signs of massive industrial activity and what appeared to be a thriving technological civilization. When Dr. Lethmore presented his findings to the emergency council session, the chamber fell completely silent. The implications were staggering. Not only was there intelligent life in the forbidden sectors, but they were apparently advanced enough to detect and respond to the probe, and confident enough to issue what could only be interpreted as a challenge. "We must send a diplomatic mission," declared Ambassador Vextai, though his voice trembled slightly. "A diplomatic mission to beings that evolved in hell itself," General Zarnoth observed grimly. "What makes you think they would be interested in helping us rather than simply adding us to their collection of conquered species?" It was High Chancellor Mordak who provided the answer. Because if they wanted to conquer the galaxy, they would have done so already. The fact that they have remained in the forbidden sectors suggests either they are content with their territory, or they are waiting for something. "Waiting for what?" asked Senator Yilandra. "Perhaps," Dr. Lethmore suggested quietly, "they are waiting for someone worthy of their attention, someone who represents a challenge worth their time." The decision to send a diplomatic mission was even more controversial than the original probe launch. Only the most desperate circumstances could have driven the galactic government to such an extreme measure. The mission would be dangerous beyond calculation, sent to make contact with beings whose very existence challenged everything the galaxy thought it knew about the nature of life and intelligence. Captain Yathak of the exploration vessel Harmony's Edge had volunteered for the mission despite understanding that it was almost certainly a one-way trip. Her ship was equipped with the most advanced life support systems available, shielding that could theoretically protect against the radiation levels in the Forbidden Sector, and a diplomatic team representing 12 different species. As the Harmony's Edge prepared to depart for the coordinates provided by the mysterious signal, news arrived that changed everything. The hegemony had begun their assault on the core worlds. The industrial planet of Carthon had fallen in less than 6 hours, and hegemony fleets were moving toward the galactic capital itself. The galaxy was running out of time, and their last hope lay with beings that might be more terrifying than their current enemies. As the Harmony's Edge entered hyperspace on its journey toward the unknown, every being in galactic civilization held their breath and wondered if they had just sealed their own doom. The ship's computer counted down the hours to their destination, while the crew tried to prepare for contact with the unknown. They had no idea what they would find in the heart of the Forbidden Sector, but they knew that the fate of 47 different civilizations now rested on the success of their desperate mission. Behind them, the galaxy burned as the hegemony continued their advance, seemingly unstoppable in their quest for total domination. Ahead lay the unknown, and the hope that somewhere in the depths of hell itself, they might find salvation. The Harmony's Edge dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Forbidden System, and immediately every alarm on the ship began screaming warnings. The radiation levels were so intense that the ship's automated systems recommended immediate retreat, but Captain Yathak overrode the safety protocols and pressed forward toward the third planet. "Captain, the radiation is unlike anything we've ever recorded," reported Chief Science Officer Veltar, her tentacles dancing nervously over her instruments. "The level should be instantly lethal to any known form of life. Yet our sensors are detecting massive energy signatures from the planet's surface." The view screen showed a world that defied comprehension. The planet's surface glowed with an angry red light, not from any sun, but from the heat of the world itself. Massive storms raged across continents that appeared to be nothing but volcanic wasteland and toxic seas. Lightning the size of small moons crackled through an atmosphere that was more poison than air. "There," whispered Communications Officer Thelvik, pointing at the sensor readings. "Look at the electromagnetic patterns. Those aren't natural formations." Captain Yathak stared at the data in disbelief. Scattered across the hellish world's surface were structures that could only be artificial. Cities, if they could be called that, built into the sides of active volcanoes. Industrial complexes that seemed to thrive in the toxic atmosphere. And, most impossibly of all, what appear to be massive spaceports where ships moved like dark insects against the burning sky. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission," announced Thelvik, his voice barely above a whisper. On speakers, Yathak commanded, trying to keep her own voice steady. The voice that emerged from the communications array was unlike anything they had ever heard. It was deep and rough, with an undertone that seemed to vibrate through the ship's hull itself. When the translation came through, the words were simple, but carried weight that made the diplomatic team exchange nervous glances. "Galactic Vessel Harmony's Edge, you are clear to land at coordinates we are transmitting. Follow the approach vector exactly, or you'll be destroyed. Welcome to Earth." The word Earth meant nothing to any of them, but the casual mention of destruction sent a chill through the crew. As they followed the transmitted coordinates down through the planet's toxic atmosphere, Captain Yathak wondered if they were flying to their deaths. The approach took them through cloud formations that would have dissolved their ship's hull if not for their advanced shielding. The temperature outside reached levels that would have vaporized most known materials. And through it all, they could see the lights of cities thriving in conditions that should have been impossible. The spaceport they were directed to was built inside the caldera of an active volcano. Massive structures of some unknown metal rose from pools of molten rock, and creatures moved about the facility wearing what appeared to be minimal environmental protection. As the Harmony's edge settled onto the designated landing platform, the diplomatic team could see their hosts approaching. They were bipedal, roughly humanoid in shape, but with subtle differences that spoke of evolution under extreme conditions. Their skin appeared to be naturally armored, with a slight metallic sheen that suggested it could withstand the radiation and heat that surrounded them. They moved with a fluid grace that spoke of perfect adaptation to their environment, and their eyes held an intelligence that was both curious and predatory. The lead figure approached the ship's airlock and spoke into what appeared to be a primitive communication device. His voice came through their systems with surprising clarity. "I am Commander Marcus Hayes of the Terran Colonial Defense Force. You have requested assistance against an enemy that has proven difficult for your people to handle. Before we discuss terms, you will need to meet with our leadership. However, I should warn you that the journey will be challenging for beings evolved on gentler worlds." Captain Yathak activated the external speakers. "Commander Hayes, I am Captain Yathak of the Galactic Council Diplomatic Mission. We are prepared to meet with your leadership, though I confess we are uncertain about our ability to survive in your environment." The human's response carried what sounded like amusement. "Don't worry about the environment. You'll be traveling in a protected transport. However, you should understand that humans prefer to conduct important business in our natural habitat. You're going to visit one of our major cities." The transport that arrived to collect the diplomatic team was unlike any vehicle they had ever seen. It was built like a fortress, with armor thick enough to withstand direct weapons fire and a power source that seemed to generate its own electromagnetic field. As they traveled across the planet's surface, the diplomats stared in amazement at the civilization that had somehow flourished in hell. Human cities were architectural marvels that defied logic. Buildings rose from lakes of molten rock, their foundations somehow stable despite the constant seismic activity. Parks and recreation areas were carved into the sides of active volcanoes, with humans engaging in activities that looked suspiciously like entertainment despite the deadly environment surrounding them. "How is this possible?" whispered Ambassador Vextai as they passed a group of humans who appeared to be playing some kind of sport in an area where the ground temperature exceeded the melting point of most metals. Commander Hayes, who was accompanying them personally, overheard the question. "Humans are adaptable," he replied simply. "We've lived on worlds like this for over 50,000 years. This is actually one of our milder colony worlds. You should see the settlements we've established inside gas giants or on the surfaces of neutron stars." The diplomatic team exchanged glances of pure horror. These beings had established colonies on neutron stars, stellar objects so dense that a teaspoon of their matter would weigh as much as a small moon. Their destination was the planetary capital, a city called New Geneva that had been built in the crater of a supervolcano. The buildings rose in spirals around pools of magma that served as both power sources and decorative features. The transport landed on a platform that extended out over a chasm filled with molten rock, and the heat radiating through their protective vehicle was enough to make several of the diplomats feel faint. "The President will meet with you in the council chamber," Commander Hayes announced as they were escorted through corridors that seemed to be carved directly from volcanic rock. "I should mention that President Chun has been following your galactic situation with interest. Humans have dealt with aggressive expansionist species before." The council chamber was a vast space hollowed out from the heart of the volcano itself. The walls glowed with natural heat, and streams of magma provided both lighting and climate control. At the center of the chamber, a single figure waited for them. President Sarah Chun was a woman who appeared to be in middle age by human standards, though the diplomats had no way to judge such things. She wore simple clothing that seemed to provide no protection against the extreme environment, yet she moved with complete comfort in conditions that would have killed most galactic species instantly. "Welcome to Earth," she said, her voice carrying easily through the chamber despite the rumble of volcanic activity all around them. "I understand your galaxy is facing an extinction-level threat. Please, Tell me about this hegemony that has your people so concerned. Captain Yathak, speaking for the diplomatic team, described the hegemony's weapons, their tactics, and the seemingly hopeless nature of the galactic defense efforts. As she spoke, President Chun listened with an expression that gradually shifted from interest to what could only be described as mild annoyance. So they glass planets from orbit, use adaptive shielding, and have self-repairing armor, the president summarized when the captain had finished. Their ground forces are genetically enhanced for combat effectiveness, and their fleet commanders show no mercy to civilian populations. That is correct, confirmed Ambassador Vextai. Our combined fleets have proven helpless against their technology. We have lost 17 worlds in the past month alone, with projections indicating total galactic conquest within 2 years. President Chun was quiet for a long moment, and the only sound in the chamber was the distant rumble of the volcano around them. When she finally spoke, her words sent chills through the diplomatic team despite the overwhelming heat. You need to understand something about humans, she said slowly. We are not a peaceful species. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us every single day, and we not only survived, but thrived. We turned our homeworld from a death trap into a garden, and when that wasn't enough, we spread to worlds that made our homeworld look hospitable. She stood and walked to a window that looked out over the city sprawling across the volcanic landscape. Every human you see outside has grown up in an environment that would kill most galactic species in seconds. Every child learns to survive in conditions that your people consider impossible. We are, by galactic standards, living weapons. The president turned back to face the diplomatic team, and her eyes held a cold fire that made them all step back instinctively. The hegemony sounds like they have become comfortable with easy victories over species that evolved in paradise. They have never faced an enemy that considers their home worlds to be pleasant vacation destinations. You will help us? Asked Captain Yathak, hardly daring to hope. Help you? President Chun smiled, and the expression was both reassuring and terrifying. Captain, you've just told us that there's an aggressive military force out there that specializes in destroying peaceful civilizations. From a human perspective, the hegemony has just declared war on every innocent species in the galaxy. She activated a communication device and spoke in crisp military tones. Admiral Morrison, initiate Protocol 7. Full colonial fleet mobilization. Priority Alpha. The response came back immediately. Understood, Madam President. Fleet commanders are asking about rules of engagement. President Chen's smile grew wider. Tell them that the enemy has been glassing civilian populations. Full retribution protocols authorized. She turned back to the diplomats. Gentlemen, ladies, honored beings of various classifications, you came here seeking an ally. What you have found is a species that has been waiting 50,000 years for someone to give us a good reason to remind the galaxy why certain sectors were declared forbidden. Through the chamber's windows, they could see ships rising from the volcanic landscape. Massive vessels that seemed to have been built for war from the ground up, their hulls glowing with heat that would have melted conventional armor. The human fleet was awakening, and even from their protected position, the diplomats could feel the power radiating from those ships. How many vessels do you have? Asked General Zarnoff, his warrior's instincts responding to the display of military might. In this system alone, President Chun consulted a datapad. Roughly 12,000 combat vessels, ranging from patrol craft to planet killers. But don't worry, we won't be sending our entire fleet. That would be overkill. The diplomatic team stared in stunned silence. 12,000 warships in a single system, and the humans considered that just one minor fleet element. How long until you can reach our galaxy? Captain Yathak managed to ask. Our advanced scouts should arrive in your core systems within 6 days, the president replied casually. The main battle groups will follow within 2 weeks. I suggest you warn your people that help is coming. Human ships and human tactics can be intense for allied forces that aren't prepared for our methods. As if to emphasize her point, The chamber shook as another wave of ships launched from the volcanic surface. The sound was like thunder, but underneath it was something else. Something that spoke of violence and death held in check, waiting for a worthy target. The diplomats realized that they had not just found an ally. They had awakened something that had been sleeping in the depths of space, something that the galaxy had forgotten existed. The hegemony was about to learn why humanity had been left alone in the forbidden sectors for so long. They were about to discover that there are worse things in the universe than conquerors. There are species that eat conquerors for breakfast and ask for seconds. Fleet Admiral Sarah Morrison stood on the bridge of the TNB Retribution, watching the tactical displays show the deployment of the Terran Response Fleet. Around her, 200 human warships moved through space with the coordinated precision of a predator pack. Each vessel was a masterwork of engineering born from 50,000 years of warfare against hostile environments and hostile species. The Retribution itself was a dreadnought-class vessel, designed specifically for operations against technologically advanced enemies. Its hull was composed of neutronium steel composite that could withstand direct hits from stellar-grade weapons, while its arsenal included everything from antimatter torpedoes to gravitational distortion cannons. "Admiral, we're receiving updates from the advanced scouts," reported Captain Elena Vasquez, Morrison's tactical coordinator. "They've made contact with the retreating galactic forces at the Kepler defense line." Morrison nodded grimly. The Kepler defense line was supposedly the galaxy's last major fortification, a collection of space stations and defensive platforms that represented the combined military might of 47 different species. According to the intelligence reports, it was also where the galactic forces were making their final stand against the hegemony advance. "What's the situation?" Morrison asked. Captain Vasquez consulted her datapad, her expression growing darker as she read. "It's bad, Admiral. The hegemony broke through the outer defensive perimeter 6 hours ago. Estimated galactic casualties are over 2 million personnel, with at least 15 major warships destroyed or disabled. The remaining forces are in full retreat toward the core systems. And our scouts." Commander Park's squadron arrived just as the galactic retreat began. They've been monitoring hegemony tactical patterns and conducting preliminary reconnaissance. The enemy appears to be regrouping for a final push toward the galactic capital. Morrison studied the holographic display showing the battle zone. The tactical situation was clear enough. The galactic forces had been systematically outmaneuvered and overpowered, their retreat turning into a rout as the hegemony pressed their advantage. It was a textbook example of technological superiority overwhelming numerical advantage. "Time target?" she asked. 47 hours at current speed," replied her navigation officer. "The hegemony fleet will likely reach the galactic capital before we arrive." Morrison's smile was cold as space itself. "No, Lieutenant, they won't." She activated the fleet-wide communication channel. "All ships, this is Admiral Morrison. We have a situation that requires immediate attention. Hostile forces are currently pursuing retreating civilian populations with intent to commit genocide. Rules of engagement are now active. I repeat, rules of engagement are now active." Throughout the fleet, the response was immediate and unanimous. The phrase rules of engagement had a specific meaning in the Terran Colonial Defense Force. It meant that the enemy had been classified as a threat to innocent life, and that human forces were authorized to use any and all methods necessary to eliminate that threat. On the bridge of the assault carrier Vengeance, Captain Marcus Steele watched his pilots complete their final equipment checks. The Vengeance carried 300 of the most advanced fighters in human space, each one piloted by individuals who had trained since childhood to operate in the hostile environment of space combat. "Pilots, this is Captain Steele," he announced over the squadron communication channel. "You've all reviewed the intelligence reports on hegemony capabilities. Their ships have adaptive shielding, self-repairing armor, and weapon systems that have proven superior to standard galactic military technology." In the pilot briefing room, Flight Leader Jessica Torres listened to the captain's words while running through her pre-flight checklist. Around her, 30 other pilots made final preparations for what would likely be the most intense combat of their careers. However, Captain Steele continued. You should remember that the hegemony has never faced human military technology. They have never encountered pilots who learned to fly by navigating asteroid fields and solar flares. They have never fought against ships designed to operate in the hearts of gas giants and the photospheres of stars. Torres smiled grimly as she climbed into the cockpit of her fighter. The Terran Aerospace Force didn't recruit pilots from peaceful worlds with gentle gravity and stable weather. Human pilots learned their skills in environments where a single mistake meant death, where split-second decisions determined whether you flew home or became another casualty statistic. Her fighter was a Raptor-class interceptor built for speed and firepower rather than comfort. The cockpit was barely large enough to contain her, with every available surface covered in controls and displays. The weapon systems included plasma cannons that could punch through most known armor types, and quantum torpedoes that could track targets through multiple dimensional phases. All squadrons prepare for combat drop, came the announcement from Fleet Command. Target zone is the Kepler defense line. Enemy forces are estimated at over 300 vessels of various classifications. The tactical briefing that followed would have horrified the retreating galactic forces if they had been able to monitor it. Human fleet doctrine was based on decades of experience fighting in the most hostile environments imaginable against enemies that range from cybernetic war machines to energy beings that existed in multiple dimensions. The hegemony had made the mistake of assuming that all galactic species were similar to the ones they had already conquered. They were about to learn that the galaxy contained forms of life that were far more dangerous than they had imagined. Admiral Morrison studied the real-time tactical updates from the advanced scouts. The hegemony fleet had arranged itself in a standard pursuit formation, confident in their ability to overwhelm any remaining galactic resistance. Their ships were indeed impressive by galactic standards, with energy shielding that adapted to incoming weapons fire and armor that could repair battle damage in real time. But human weapons weren't designed to fight galactic opponents. They were designed to destroy targets that existed in environments where matter itself became unstable, where the laws of physics operated under extreme conditions that most species considered impossible. Admiral, we're picking up communication traffic from the hegemony fleet, reported the communication officer. They appear to be coordinating their final assault on the galactic core worlds. Morrison listened to the intercepted transmissions, her expression growing colder with each word. The hegemony commanders were discussing their plans for the civilian populations of the core worlds with casual indifference, treating the extinction of entire species as nothing more than an administrative detail. All ships advance to combat positions, she ordered. Prepare for immediate engagement upon arrival. The human fleet accelerated toward the battle zone, their ships cutting through space like arrows fired from the bow of an angry god. Behind them, the full might of human military industry was already mobilizing. Shipyards that had been building exploration vessels were retooling for war production. Military academies were graduating pilots and officers ahead of schedule. And in the depths of space, automated defense platforms that had been dormant for centuries were powering up their weapons systems. Meanwhile, in the command center of the hegemony flagship Dominion, Fleet Commander Zargoth reviewed the tactical situation with satisfaction. The galactic forces had been broken, their retreat turning into a disorganized rout. Within days, the core worlds would be under hegemony control, and another galaxy would be added to their empire. Commander, we're detecting unusual energy signatures approaching from the outer system, reported his sensor officer, a cybernetically enhanced being whose organic components had been replaced with advanced technology. Zargoth barely looked up from his battle plans. Galactic reinforcements? Negative, Commander. The energy signatures are unlike anything in our database. The ships appear to be constructed using unknown alloys and powered by technology that doesn't match any known galactic civilization. That got the fleet commander's attention. He turned to study the sensor displays, his multiple eyes focusing on the approaching contacts. The ships were indeed unusual. their design suggesting a level of technological advancement that exceeded anything the hegemony had encountered in their conquest of 17 galaxies. Numbers, he asked. Approximately 200 vessels, ranging from escort class to super dreadnought specifications. They're approaching at high velocity and appear to be heading directly for our position. Zargoth considered the situation. 200 ships against his fleet of over 300 was hardly overwhelming odds, especially given the technological superiority that had carried the hegemony through every previous conflict. Signal the fleet to maintain pursuit formation, he ordered. If these unknown vessels wish to join the galactic forces in defeat, we will accommodate them. The hegemony had conquered 17 galaxies through a combination of superior technology and ruthless tactics. They had never encountered serious resistance from any species, and their commanders had grown comfortable with easy victories against opponents who fought according to predictable patterns. They had no way of knowing that they were about to face a species that had learned warfare in environments where the hegemony's most powerful weapons would be considered mild inconveniences. They had no understanding that human military doctrine was based on the assumption that any enemy worth fighting would be technologically superior and numerically advantageous. Admiral Morrison watched the distance close between the two fleets, her tactical officers providing continuous updates on hegemony movements and capabilities. The enemy ships were impressive, she had to admit. Their shielding technology was sophisticated, and their weapons systems showed innovation that suggested a highly advanced technological base. But the hegemony had made their calculations based on fighting species that had evolved on garden worlds, whose military technology was designed for conflicts between civilized opponents operating under generally accepted rules of warfare. Humans didn't have generally accepted rules of warfare. They had survival protocols that had been refined through 50,000 years of fighting for their lives against enemies that range from hostile environments to genocidal war machines. All ships, weapons free, Admiral Morrison announced. Engage targets of opportunity. Remember, these are the beings who have been glassing civilian populations. No mercy, no quarter, no survivors who might carry word back to their leadership about our capabilities. The human fleet split into attack formations that had been developed through centuries of combat against technologically superior opponents. Each ship knew its role. Each captain understood the tactical doctrine that had never failed to achieve victory, no matter how desperate the odds. The hegemony was about to learn that there were species in the universe that considered genocide to be a declaration of war against existence itself. They were about to discover that some enemies don't just fight to win. Some enemies fight to make sure that nothing like you ever threatens innocent life again. The first contact between the human fleet and the hegemony occurred at precisely 1422 Galactic Standard Time, when Commander Park's advanced scouts engaged the outer pickets of the enemy formation. The initial exchange lasted less than 30 seconds, but its results would reshape the galactic understanding of warfare forever. Hegemony Destroyer Talon had been operating as part of the fleet's screening force, its captain confident in the vessel's adaptive shielding and self-repairing armor. When the unknown ship appeared on their sensors, Captain Vorthek ordered a standard engagement, expecting to add another destroyed enemy vessel to his record. The human scout ship, TMV Shadow Strike, was a Phantom-class stealth destroyer designed for reconnaissance and first contact scenarios. Its pilot, Commander Lisa Park, had grown up on the mining world of Hades Prime, where children learned to navigate through fields of superheated plasma and radiation storms that could fry electronic systems. Enemy vessel is charging weapons, reported her tactical officer, Lieutenant Kim Nakamura. Energy signature suggests plasma-based armament, approximately 15% above standard galactic military specifications. Commander Park smiled coldly. 15% above galactic specifications might impress species that had evolved on peaceful worlds, but human military technology was designed to operate in environments where matter itself became unstable. Lock on a target, she ordered. Prepare quantum torpedo spread. Let's see how their adaptive shielding handles weapons that don't exist in normal spacetime. The Talon fired first, its plasma cannons sending bolts of superheated energy toward the human ship at significant fractions of light speed. The weapons were powerful enough to crack the hull of any known galactic vessel, and Captain Vorthek watched with satisfaction as they struck their target. His satisfaction turned to confusion when the human ship's hull barely registered the impact. The energy that should have vaporized armor plating simply dispersed across the vessel's surface like water against stone. "Impossible," whispered his tactical officer. "Our weapons should have penetrated their hull easily." "Perhaps their technology is more advanced than we thought," Captain Vorthek replied. "No matter. Increase firing rate. Concentrate all weapons on target." The Talon's entire armament opened fire, sending a concentrated barrage toward the human ship. For a moment, space itself seemed to burn as energy levels approached those found in the photospheres of small stars. Any galactic vessel caught in such firepower would have been reduced to component atoms. The Shadow Strike absorbed the barrage without visible damage, its hull composition designed to withstand the gravitational forces found in the hearts of gas giants. The energy that the hegemony considered devastating was merely another environmental hazard to be managed and overcome. "Enemy weapons are ineffective," reported Lieutenant Nakamura. "Shall we return fire, Commander?" Commander Park studied the tactical display, noting the hegemony ship's design characteristics and weapons placement. "Fire one torpedo targeted at their engineering section. Minimum yield." The quantum torpedo that launched from the Shadow Strike was barely visible as it phased through multiple dimensions on its way to the target. Unlike conventional weapons that relied on kinetic or energy-based damage, quantum torpedoes attacked the fundamental forces that held matter together at the subatomic level. Captain Vorthek watched in horror as his ship simply began to dissolve. The torpedo didn't explode in any conventional sense. Instead, it created a localized field where the strong nuclear force ceased to function, causing the atoms in his ship's hull to simply drift apart like sand in the wind. "Emergency power to shields," he screamed, but there were no shields that could protect against weapons that attacked reality itself. The Talon died quietly, its crew never understanding how they had been killed. Commander Park watched the enemy vessel fade from her sensors, then turned her attention to the tactical update from Fleet Command. The main engagement was about to begin, and Admiral Morrison had requested real-time assessment of hegemony capabilities. "Signal the Admiral," she ordered. "Enemy defensive systems are ineffective against quantum-based weapons. Their armor appears to be standard neutronium composite, impressive by galactic standards, but vulnerable to dimensional phasing. Recommend full engagement." Throughout the approaching human fleet, similar reports were coming in from other scout encounters. The hegemony's technological advantages meant nothing against opponents who had learned to fight in environments where the laws of physics themselves were hostile. On the bridge of the Retribution, Admiral Morrison reviewed the intelligence reports with grim satisfaction. The hegemony's adaptive shielding was designed to counter energy weapons and kinetic projectiles. It couldn't adapt to weapons that existed outside normal space-time or ammunition that was composed of exotic matter that violated the conservation of energy. "All ships commence primary engagement," she ordered. "Remember, these are the beings who have been murdering civilians. Show them what happens when they threaten innocent life in human-protected space." The battle that followed would be studied by military historians for centuries. The hegemony fleet, confident in their technological superiority, formed standard battle lines and opened fire with weapons that had destroyed the combined fleets of 17 galaxies. The human ships met them with weapons that had been designed to fight wars in environments where conventional technology simply couldn't function. Gravitational distortion cannons that could create localized black holes. Antimatter torpedoes that carried enough destructive force to crack planets. And, most terrifyingly of all, dimensional phase weapons that could attack targets in parallel universes. Fleet Commander Zargoth stood on the bridge of the Dominion, watching his fleet's weapons fire concentrating on the nearest human vessels. The energy levels being deployed were enough to sterilize entire star systems. Yet the enemy ships continued advancing through the barrage as if it were nothing more than a gentle rain. "How are they doing this?" demanded his tactical officer. "Our weapons should be more than sufficient to destroy any known vessel." Before Zargoth could respond, the human fleet opened fire. The universe itself seemed to scream as exotic weapons violated the fundamental laws of physics, creating explosions that existed in dimensions the hegemony had never imagined. The first human salvo destroyed 16 hegemony vessels in less than 10 seconds. The second salvo eliminated 30 more. By the time the third salvo reached its targets, the hegemony fleet was already beginning to break formation, their discipline crumbling in the face of weapons that seemed to defy reality. Captain Elena Vasquez watched the tactical display from her position aboard the battle cruiser Nemesis, coordinating the fleet's assault with the cold precision that had made her one of humanity's most decorated naval officers. Around her ship, human fighters swept through the hegemony formation like sharks in a feeding frenzy. The fighters themselves were marvels of human engineering, capable of operating in the cores of stars and the event horizons of black holes. Their pilots had trained in environments that would have killed most galactic species instantly, learning to make split-second decisions while pulling gravitational forces that would have liquefied organic tissue. Flight leader Jessica Torres led her squadron through a formation of hegemony cruisers, her Raptor-class fighter dancing between energy beams that could have vaporized small moons. The enemy ships were impressive, she had to admit, but they had been designed to fight opponents who operated under the same physical limitations. "Target the command ship," she ordered her squadron. "Concentrated torpedo strike on the bridge section. Let's end this quickly." The quantum torpedoes that our fighters launched were each no larger than a human fist, but they carried enough destructive potential to eliminate city-sized targets. They phased through the hegemony ships' shields as if they didn't exist, then detonated inside the hull in explosions that existed outside normal space-time. The Dominion, flagship of the hegemony fleet, and the personal command ship of Fleet Commander Zargoth, died in less than 15 seconds. Its destruction sent shockwaves through the remaining enemy vessels, as hegemony commanders realized that their technological advantages meant nothing against enemies who fought with weapons that shouldn't have been possible. "All ships, retreat," came the panic transmission from the surviving hegemony vessels. "Fall back to the rally point. Request immediate reinforcement from the core fleets." But retreat wasn't an option. Admiral Morrison had deployed her ships in a formation that the human military called an annihilation pattern, designed to ensure that no enemy vessel escaped to carry intelligence back to their commanders. "Signal all ships," she ordered. "No survivors. These beings have proven they cannot coexist with civilized life. Total extermination authorized." The phrase sent a chill through even her experienced crew. Total extermination was reserved for enemies that posed an existential threat to innocent life, species that had proven they could never be reasoned with or deterred through conventional means. The hegemony had earned that designation by glassing civilian worlds and murdering entire species without provocation. Now, they would learn that such actions carried consequences that extended far beyond their comprehension. The battle lasted another 23 minutes. When it was over, no hegemony vessel remained intact. No escape pods had been allowed to reach safety. No communication signals had been permitted to reach enemy territory. 317 ships of the line, the most powerful fleet the hegemony had ever assembled, had been reduced to drifting debris in the space of less than an hour. Admiral Morrison studied the tactical aftermath reports, noting the efficiency with which her fleet had eliminated the enemy. 0 human casualties. Minimal ammunition expenditure. Complete tactical objective achieved. Signal the galactic forces, she ordered. Inform them that the immediate threat has been neutralized. Also inform them that we're going to need detailed intelligence on hegemony territory and military assets. Her communication officer looked puzzled. "Admiral, shouldn't we coordinate with Galactic Command before taking further action?" Morrison's smile was colder than the vacuum of space. "Lieutenant, the hegemony has 17 galaxies under their control. 17 galaxies filled with enslaved populations and murdered civilizations. We're not here to win a battle. We're here to ensure that nothing like the hegemony ever threatens innocent life again. She turned back to the tactical displays, already planning the next phase of operations. The hegemony had made the mistake of attracting human attention through their genocidal actions. They were about to learn that humanity didn't just fight wars. They fought crusades.